Level 1. The Straw Buyer. You are 21, at a Georgia trade show holding a sealed case that does not belong to you. Your cousin's friend offered $200 because he cannot pass the dealer's background check himself. The dealer gives you a federal form, and one question asks whether you are the actual buyer. The dealer asks once, but the form keeps answering after the booth is gone. It preserves an official version of that minute. You sign because the question feels smaller than the cash, and the sale is logged under your name. Outside, the friend takes the unopened case, and your sister Maya sees the money when you pay for dinner. You say you sold old tools, and she notices the folded receipt in your pocket. Maya tells you, "Leo, I am not asking what he wanted. I am asking whose name is on that form." Money disappears, but a signed form does not. If something happens with that item, you will be the first person they can find. You laugh and tell her nothing will happen, and the transfer took seconds, and the buyer drove away quietly. Months later, police recover an item during another investigation, and a trace can begin with the serial number. A trace is not a conviction, and it does not prove every transfer. It can lead investigators back to the dealer and buyer. The dealer retrieves the record, and your signature is still there, exactly where you left it. Investigators still need evidence of knowledge and intent, but a lawful purchase now has an unlawful question attached. The first level is not an empire, it is a name that strangers can later read on a form. Level 2. The modified mechanism. Each handoff feels smaller than the purchase that started everything. The messages make those handoffs easier to compare later. You tell yourself the envelopes contain somebody else's decision. Investigators may instead ask who carried, paid, and returned. The difference is not a technical label, it is what your own actions reveal. Omar shows you a video on his phone, highlighting a feature that modifies standard operation. He wants small conversion parts delivered in padded envelopes, and he calls them plastic and laughs at your concern. Federal law can place rapid conversion parts under restricted classifications, and penalties depend on the item and facts. You do not build anything on camera, and you agree to carry envelopes and collect payment. That decision creates messages, cash transfers, photographs, and people who recognize your car. The envelopes are never merely envelopes again. Maya finds one inside your father's old cereal box, and the box has been sitting above the refrigerator for years. Maya tells you, Dad kept receipts because he hated owing anyone an explanation. Now you hide things beside his breakfast box. I do not know what is inside. I know you moved it when you heard me come in. You move the envelopes to Omar's apartment, and that choice changes nothing already stored on the phone. One buyer is later arrested for an unrelated offense, and his phone contains your nickname beside pictures of the parts. An ATF investigator named Dana Kessler sees the nickname while checking a recovered item's trace. She does not knock on your door. She compares the messages with dealer records and seized items. One screen cannot finish a case, but it can start questions. Your first purchase now sits beside a second category of evidence, and the case has begun to acquire a shape. Level 3. The interstate pipeline. A motel clerk does not know your purpose, and a receipt proves no offense by itself. The same receipt can still sit beside stronger evidence later. That is how a route becomes visible. Separate places begin repeating the same people and dates. You still call each trip work. The file begins calling it a pattern. Omar says local buyers are becoming impatient, and he wants inventory bought in one state and sold somewhere else. He calls it driving, as though a highway turns an illicit distribution network into an errand. You start spending weekends away from home. Maya notices motel charges on the family account, and you stop using the card after she asks about them. The statement has already preserved the dates, and so have the dealer receipts and your phone messages. Recovered items can be traced back through the legal supply chain, and that does not automatically identify an illicit distributor. It can point agents toward dealers, buyers, associates, and dates requiring more investigation. Repeated overlap is what makes the route matter. Dana tells a new investigator, a trace is a beginning, not a verdict. We look for corroboration. That means records, witnesses, recovered items, and travel that fits the same dates. A good case explains why each fact belongs beside the others. Her team requests records through the legal processes that apply, and they interview people who remember you buying and leaving. One dealer remembers the friend waiting near the exit. A motel clerk remembers the same car arriving after midnight. Neither memory proves a criminal agreement. Together, they help investigators decide which records deserve closer attention. The case stops looking like one recovered item. It begins looking like repeated choices made by the same small group. You are not stopped at every state line, and the pressure is slower and much less dramatic. A recovered serial number carries a date into a system built to ask where it began. Your travel starts aligning with purchase dates. You notice buyers want quantities you cannot explain to yourself, and you keep accepting cash anyway. By the end of level 3, the chain has a route, and it has dates, names, and repeated movement. Level 4, the unmarked assembly. The garage feels private because its door rolls down. Its rent, deliveries, and visitors remain outside the door. Every arrival leaves a practical question for someone else to answer. Who ordered it? Who accepted it? And who paid? A hidden room cannot answer those questions. It can only collect them. The highway makes you nervous. So Omar offers a different business, and he says unfinished kits leave less paperwork. He rents a garage and fills it with deliveries, and you are not shown technical steps for assembling non-compliant hardware. You are shown the appeal of items that may be harder to trace after recovery. That appeal becomes the sales pitch. Rules governing frames, receivers, and kits have changed through regulation and litigation. Their application depends on the item and date. That uncertainty does not make secret conduct lawful, and it makes the eventual investigation more technical and document-heavy. Orders arrive at addresses connected to people who barely know one another, and payment applications show repeated small transfers. You open a channel under a false name. It gives buyers questions and investigators a list. Shipments can generate labels, routing scans, payment trails, and witnesses. And a parcel alone proves little, but patterns can matter. Omar tells you, nobody cares about boxes, Leo. They see cardboard every day. Keep the channel quiet, take payment, and let buyers worry about their orders. Nobody remembers who carried a package across a parking lot. You want to believe him because the garage has no sign. The lease still identifies the renter and the days of occupancy. Dana receives a referral after several recovered items share components connected to one distributor, and she asks for more records. One delivery address belongs to a tenant who says he never ordered anything. He kept the label because it looked wrong. That label does not identify the person who placed the order. It gives the investigation another date, address, and account to test. The garage remains quiet, but its quiet now requires more explanations than it did before. The old purchase route now meets the garage deliveries. What felt like a new method becomes another line in the same file. Level 5, the corrupt licensee. Victor wants the records to remain Victor's problem. His fear makes that bargain less stable every day. A regulated business turns private dishonesty into a record-keeping problem. The bookkeeper has a job, a family, and copies. Eventually, those ordinary things matter more than Victor's promise. His silence becomes another fact. The garage produces more demand than Omar can handle, and he introduces you to Victor Hale, a struggling licensed dealer. Victor has overdue bills and a storage room full of inventory. He says he can make items disappear from the books. Licensed dealers have record-keeping duties and theft, or loss reporting duties, and compliance failures can attract regulatory attention. That does not mean every missing item proves a conspiracy, and theft occurs, records contain errors, and proof still matters. Victor's entries begin conflicting with the cases leaving through his back door, and he writes explanations after each discrepancy appears. You receive inventory that has two histories, and one history sits in Victor's books while another sits in your messages. His bookkeeper starts saving copies at home and she is frightened, so she first calls her brother. Fear creates a witness before it creates a report, and that witness sees the paperwork differently from Victor. Victor tells you, the forms say loss, not sale. That is all they say. Do not ask me for more than that. A page can look clean, but I still know what left through the back door. Dana's inspection is not a magic algorithm, and it is a review of inventory, records, explanations, and missing items. Victor receives a request for documents, and he stops taking your calls and asks a lawyer for time. His bookkeeper learns that agents want to speak with her. She opens the drawer where she saved the copied adjustments. She did not save them to build a case. She saved them because the numbers made her afraid. That private act gives the investigation a second account of Victor's inventory. It also gives Victor a reason to worry. You paid him for access, not loyalty. And his regulated records now create pressure on someone besides you. Level 6, the border broker. Victor's silence makes Omar frantic, and a broker offers buyers beyond the border and money through intermediaries. You never meet the final buyers, and that distance becomes another story you tell yourself about responsibility. Moving controlled inventory across borders can trigger federal export regulations and separate criminal exposure and classification, destination, and authorization matter. You arrange introductions and receive money through people claiming to help friends, and each person creates another weak link. The broker's first demand arrives through a cousin you have never met. The cousin wants a date, a price, and no questions. When you hesitate, the broker calls Omar instead. You learn that your role can be reassigned without a conversation. That is the visible cost of this level. You are no longer a seller choosing buyers. You are a replaceable contact. Federal, state, and local agencies can work together on illicit distribution cases. Their methods depend on authority and facts. They begin with seizures, statements, records, and a courier who has decided he cannot carry the risk alone. One courier is stopped for an unrelated offense, and he later decides to cooperate after speaking with counsel. Cooperation does not become truth because a person is scared, and prosecutors test it against records and other evidence. The courier describes a meeting that investigators can compare with tolls, messages, and Victor's visitor log. Some details match, while others do not. The task force documents both, rather than keeping only convenient parts. That discipline changes the case. It becomes less dependent on one person's fear and more dependent on corroborated facts. Dana tells the task force, "Do not build this around one frightened man. Build it around what survives him." His account matters only when it meets records, recoveries, and people who never expected their stories to be compared. The courier names Omar, and Omar's messages name Victor, while Victor's books show your visits and purchases. Maya stops, and calling after a late argument, and her silence is the first cost you cannot pay away. The case includes a cooperating witness who knows your voice. Reports record what he says happened. Level 7. The export shipment. The paperwork is supposed to describe reality. When it does not, every later signature becomes harder to explain. A destination can determine which rules and agencies matter. That is why a vague answer carries risk. The broker wants larger shipments, and he talks about cargo as though it is weather and nobody's personal decision. You help prepare paperwork for equipment leaving the country, and you are not told every final destination. That vagueness is not protection, and export rules require licenses or other authorization for many restricted controlled items. The exact classification and destination matter, and that is why investigators compare invoices, declarations, communications, and actual cargo. There is no lesson here about hiding cargo. The question is what paperwork does after a lie enters it. An invoice claims one thing while another record says something else, and the mismatch begins as a document problem. Banks may file suspicious activity reports under specified conditions, and a report is confidential and does not decide guilt. It can still lead investigators to compare transactions with a larger case, and the broker's company appears beside Omar's contacts. The broker stops answering when one payment is delayed. Omar sends you a new contact without explanation. The new contact refuses to release money until the missing payment is explained. For 2 days, nobody will meet you. You realize nobody in the network has a complete view. Everyone is waiting for someone else to explain the missing money. That uncertainty strands you between people who no longer trust one another. It also makes each changed story more valuable to investigators. Maya tells you, "I kept Dad's receipt because it reminded me of when you came home on time." You say paperwork is temporary. It is not temporary to me. Every new paper means I lose another ordinary version of you. You do not answer. Her voicemail stays on your phone while you prepare another packet for somebody else to sign. Dana obtains additional records through the processes available in the investigation, and the inquiry now reaches beyond Victor's store. The export document travels farther than you do, and it carries your network into another jurisdiction. Level 8. The converging records. You change names, phones, and accounts, and you think a new label creates a new life. It does not erase records made by other people, and it gives analysts more versions to compare. No nationwide system automatically solves every case. Agencies have different databases, limits, errors, and legal boundaries. The task force must request, compare, and document each connection. The pattern does not prove intent by itself. Dana sees appointment times in your messages, and those times align with Victor's store and a shipping address. Your old nickname appears in the courier's contacts, and your new number appears in Omar's cloud backup. The names differ, but the surrounding people remain the same. And that is how a network becomes legible. Dana tells Victor's bookkeeper, "We are not asking you to remember everything perfectly. Tell us what you saw. Records can answer parts that memory cannot. Your honesty helps us understand which documents matter and which ones do not." The bookkeeper gives investigators saved copies, and they show corrections, dates, and a fear that had become routine. Dana's chart becomes part of an affidavit asking a judge to authorize a garage search. It explains why the records fit together. At dawn, agents search the garage under court authority, and they photograph shelves, take devices, and leave the floor empty. The landlord changes the lock afterward, and you stand outside holding a key that opens nothing. The search turns that affidavit into an evidence inventory, and your first purchase now touches every later decision. Level 9. The controlled delivery. The courier calls after months of silence, and he says he has one final shipment and wants payment. You should be suspicious, but suspicion is not knowledge of what agents or a court have authorized. In some investigations, law enforcement uses controlled deliveries, and their safeguards and legality depend on the case. The courier agrees to make the call, and agents document the plan because it can later be examined in court. He sounds nervous because he is nervous. You hear only a chance to close one final problem. At the warehouse, the folder on the table has a shipping label and your name beside a signature line. You reach for it as if the paper were harmless. That reflex is the same one that began at the trade show. The agents move when their planned conditions occur, and there is no speech and no perfect confession. You are handcuffed, searched, and taken away, and Maya's number remains in your phone when it is inventoried. The courier tells you, "I did not call because I trusted you. I called because I was scared. They showed me the records, Leo. I finally understood that every time we called it one small thing, we added another page." In an interview room, Dana places the original sale form beside Victor's inventory records. She does not call them automatic proof. She says they explain why the investigation did not begin last night. The arrest creates reports, charges, and a court date. You spent years moving objects through other hands, and now documents move through a process you cannot control. Level 10. Conspiracy and sentence. The arrest did not decide the case. It moved the story into charging papers, lawyers, motions, and a courtroom. A court tests admissible evidence rather than prior explanations. Records may be challenged, and witnesses may be contradicted. Federal conspiracy law can punish an agreement when required elements are proven. Federal transfer offenses can carry separate statutory consequences. Charges and sentences depend on conduct, proof, jurisdiction, and prosecutorial decisions. And a dramatic title cannot decide a sentence. Your lawyer explains that the government must prove its case, and records are evidence, not a replacement for that burden. But the records now arrive together: the original form, messages, shipping documents, Victor's books, and the courier's account. Your argument at every level was separation, and one favor seemed separate from each later envelope: dealer, route, and shipment. The case argues accumulation, and each action created evidence that helped explain the next action. Maya comes to the courthouse once, and she carries the serial box receipt inside a plastic sleeve. Maya tells you, "I thought that receipt proved one ordinary day still existed. Now I know it was only a bookmark." You did not become someone else in one moment. You kept choosing pages until the whole book closed around you. The receipt is not relevant evidence, and Maya kept it because it belonged to the brother she recognized. If imprisonment follows, the Bureau of Prisons decides placement under its own classifications. And ADX Florence is not automatic. It is an administrative maximum facility for selected high security prisoners, and it is not the generic ending for every federal case. Your ending is smaller than a movie prison, and it is a hearing where the past arrives in labeled exhibits. Dana watches from the gallery, and she first saw your name beside a recovered item years earlier. The signature, messages, inventory, and export file were never separate risks. Together, they slowly learned to describe you. The remotionary is not guaranteed punishment, and it is escalation creating records that lengthen the shadow of later choices. If this changed how you see the paperwork behind illicit transfers, share it. Subscribe for another system most people notice too late.